Who here wants to live a long, healthy life? The answer is everyone. Good health allows people to work, learn, support their families, and enjoy a better quality of life. But what factors are most closely associated with differences in health outcomes? Countries invest in many different areas of healthcare, from improving healthcare access to expanding vaccination programs. Yet mortality rates continue to vary significantly around the world. So today I invite you to join me as we journey through countries and years and health indicators using data to uncover the patterns that shape global health. The main research question we will be answering today is which health indicators are most strongly associated with mortality outcomes across countries and years? To help answer this question, we will examine three sub-questions. First is what mortality outcomes are strongly associated with health service access? Second is which vaccination programs have a strong association with the mortality outcomes identified in the previous question? And finally, which country shows on average the highest mortality outcomes identified in question one and the highest vaccination rates, the programs identified in question two. To help answer these questions, we will use several data sets. These are all the independent variables we will be using in this presentation, and all of these variables look at the percent of health service access, and the remaining variables measure the percent of a targeted population that receives a specific vaccine. One variable looks at the percentage of health service access, and the rest look at a vaccination. All of these dependent variables we will be using in this, these are all the dependent variables we will be using in this presentation, and all of these variables look at a certain mortality rate. This dashboard brings together all the datasets introduced in the previous slides into a single interactive view. At the top right are two parameters that allow us to, that will, two parameter controls that allow us to select any mortality rate and any vaccination measure to analyze. I also included filters for countries and years so we could focus on specific locations or time periods. In the top left is a world map that shows the countries selected by the country filter. The map uses a color scale based on the selected mortality rate, where greener countries have lower mortality rates and redder countries have higher mortality rates. Excuse me. Below the map are two bar charts. The first displays the 10 countries with the highest value for the selected mortality value, or sorry, selected mortality rate, while the second displays the top 10 countries with the highest value for the selected vaccination rates. In the center of the dashboard are two scatter plots, and above each scatter plot is the correlation coefficient for the relationship shown below it. The scatter plot on the left examines the relationship between the selected mortality rate and health service access, with the scatter plot on the right examining the relationship between the selected mortality rate and the selected vaccination rate. Now we've seen how the dashboard is organized, let's use it to examine the relationship between health service access and each mortality rate. These are all the mortality rates ranked by their strength of correlation with health service access. As we can see, the top three mortality rates with the strongest relationship to health service access are infant mortality rate, neonatal mortality, and under 5 mortality rates. Now let's take a closer look at the three mortality rates and analyze the strength and significance of these relationships. These are screenshots of my dashboard where I selected the top three mortality rates with the strongest relationships to health service access. I know the screenshots may be a little difficult to see in detail, but each screenshot includes a white box displaying the R squared value and the P value for the relationship between the selected mortality rate and health service access. We already know that the correlation coefficients show a strong negative relationship, meaning that countries with higher health service access generally have lower mortality rates. The regression results support this relationship. Excuse me. With each mortality rate having a small p-value indicating statistically significant and R-squared values averaging around 0.75. This means that health service access explains about 75% of the variation in these mortality outcomes. These are the correlations between the top three mortality rates in each vaccination. As we can see, DTP3 has the strongest correlation with these mortality rates, while MCV2 also shows a moderately strong relationship across each of the three rates. Now let's dive a little deeper into the data and examine these relationships in more detail. These screenshots show my dashboard analyzing the relationship between MCV2 vaccination rates and the three mortality rates identified earlier. We already know that the correlation coefficients show a moderately strong negative relationship, meaning that countries with higher MCV2 vaccination rates generally have lower mortality rates. The p-values for each relationship are also very small, indicating that these results are statistically significant and unlikely due to random chance. The R-squared values for these relationships are moderate, with an average around 0.26 across the three mortality rates. This means that MCV2 vaccination rates explain approximately 26% of the variation in these mortality outcomes. These results suggest that higher MCV2 rate is associated with lower mortality rates. Sorry, lower child mortality rates. Now let's examine the relationship between DTP3 vaccination rates and these same mortality rates. These screenshots highlight the relationship between DTP3 vaccination rates and the three mortality rates we identified earlier. Compared to MCV2 and DTP3, DTP3 shows a stronger relationship with these mortality outcomes, with the correlation coefficients indicating a strong negative association. This means that countries with higher DTP3 vaccination rates generally experience lower infant, neonatal, and under 5 mortality rates. The p-values for each relationship remain very small, confirming that these results are statistically significant. Excuse me. Additionally, the R-squared values are higher than what we observed with MCV2, averaging around 0.44 across the three mortality rates. This indicates that DTP3 vaccination rates accounts for approximately 44% of the variation in these mortality outcomes. Overall, these findings suggest that higher DTP3 vaccination rates are strongly associated with lower child mortality outcomes. Now let's shift our focus and analyze these trends at the country level. Among the countries analyzed, the country with the highest average infant and under 5 mortality rate is Somalia, while Pakistan has the highest average neonatal mortality rate. On the other hand, Hungary has the highest average vaccination rate for both DTP3 and MCV2 among the countries analyzed. Overall, this analysis identified two major patterns. First, health service access showed the strongest relationship with infant, neonatal, and under 5 mortality rates. Second, vaccination rates, especially DTP3, was consistently associated with lower mortality outcomes. These factors are not the only factors that influence or that are an influence on mortality. They are among the strongest relationships identified in this analysis. Looking at country level differences also highlighted the variation in health outcomes and vaccination rates around the world. In conclusion, as stated before, this analysis showed that countries with better health service access generally experience lower infant, neonatal, and under 5 mortality rates. It also found that both TTP3 and MCV2 vaccination programs are associated with lower mortality, with DTP3 showing the strongest relationship. While health service access and vaccinations are not the only factors that affect mortality, they consistently showed some of the strongest relationships in this analysis. Every data point in this project represents real people and real communities. The insights from this analysis highlight the relationship between health service access, vaccination rates, and health outcomes around the world. Remember that data is more than just numbers. It can help identify important health challenges and guide better decisions. And I encourage each of you to think of one simple way you can support better health in your own community.